Let's calculate values using the ArcGIS API for Python. Open up the calculatevalues.py script from the data folder. Let's calculate some values for feature attributes. Up top, I'm importing the geometry class and we're going to use the areas and lengths method for the geometry object. First, we'll do a simple attribute calculation and we're going to build upon the previous video where we queried related records. We'll access ArcGIS Online using the GIS class and supplying the home string. We'll assign our GIS object, the variable called AGOL. We'll then use the GIS object content manager get method and supply in our feature service item ID, which I'll paste in now. The get method will return an item object that will assign to a variable called item. We're first going to calculate the values for our average reviews for our trail viewpoints. We get our feature layer object from our item object layers property, which returns a list of feature layer objects, and we're interested in the first feature layer object that represents the trail viewpoints layer. We then get a list of all the object IDs for our trail viewpoints layer. We use the feature layer object get unique values method, supplying in the object ID field as the attribute parameter, and we'll assign the returned list to a variable called OIDs. This is the same workflow you saw in the previous video. We get our related records information using the feature layer object, query related records. We're only interested in the rating field from our viewpoint reviews table. From the list of dictionaries returned from the related records, we create our own dictionary where the key is the object ID and the value is the average rating. These are the actual values that are going to be returned in our average rating dictionary. Object ID of 2 will have an average rating of 10. OID of 4, 6, and so on. Now we are going to update the average rating attributes for each of these features with an object ID in this dictionary in the trail viewpoints layer. For each object ID and average rating in our average rating dictionary, we're going to use the feature layer object calculate method. We'll set a where parameter to object ID equals the OID. I'll put the string formatting at the front of that string. And then we have our calc expression. And that is a dictionary. That dictionary has 2 keys. The first is field. The field we are updating is our average rating field. And the value that we are supplying is our average rating variable from our iteration. So for object ID of 2, an average rating of 10 will be set. I'll run this script. The script is complete. Let me head over to ArcGIS Online and check out the result. Here we can see the current average ratings. I'm going to turn on object ID and we can see that an object ID of 2 currently has an average rating of 0. But we know from our dictionary that that's going to be updated to 10. So I'll refresh this page. And we can see the updated average ratings in comparison to what they used to be. We'll head back over to the Python script. We'll comment out the first example. And in the second example, we are going to calculate the areas in hectares for our park boundaries. Once more, we use our item object layers property. And we're interested in the third layer, which is our park boundaries, and we'll assign the feature layer returned to a variable called FL. We use the feature layer object query method. We're interested in one field, and that is our object ID, and we're going to return geometry. And we'll assign the resulting feature set object from the query method to a variable called feature set. I'm going to create a hectare dictionary where the object ID is the key and the hectare value is the value of the dictionary. So object ID of 1 will be returned this area in hectares, 2, 3, and so on. And these are the actual values that are going to be returned. We're going to use dictionary comprehension. So for each feature in our feature set, the key is going to be the feature object ID. And we're going to use the areas and lengths method for a geometry object as the value. And we're going to round that to 2 decimal places. The areas and lengths has a few parameters that we need to use. First one is the polygons parameter, which is a list, and it is a list of polygon objects. Well, it's a list of geometry objects that represent polygons. We'll use our geometry class and we'll supply in the feature geometry. The length unit is required. We're not interested in lengths, but this method does return areas and lengths. I'll set that to 9001, which represents meters, and there is a link up in the documentation at the top of this script where you can find more information about those length units. We are more interested in the area unit, and here we use a dictionary where we set the area unit as the key, and the value is Esri hectares. Our calculation type is going to be planar, and our spatial ref will be the EPSG code for Irish Transverse Mercator, which is 2157. The areas and lengths method from the geometry class that we imported at the top of the script returns a dictionary. This dictionary has two key values, areas and lengths. We're only interested in the areas, but each return a value that is a list. This list matches the polygons list. We only have one polygon, so we're accessing the areas property and returning the first hectares value for that polygon from the list. Once we have our dictionary created, we're going to use the FeatureLayer.calculate method. So we're iterating over the hectares dictionary. So for each OID and hectare value, we're going to set the calculate expression to be the area hectare field for the park boundaries, and the value will be the hectare value from the dictionary. So object ID of 1 will have 6,421.91 as the hectare value. I'll run the script. The script is complete. Let's head over to ArcGIS Online and check out the result. Here we have our park boundaries feature layer in our park trails feature class, and we can see the area in hectares here. They're all 0. If I turn on our object ID, we saw that object ID of 1 is going to have an area of hectares of over 6,000 hectares. I'm going to refresh the page. Go back to the park boundaries. We can see that our area in hectares have been applied using the FeatureLayer.calculate method. Make sure to continue on to the next video in this series, and also make sure to subscribe. Take care.